Hey, hey, Kev Moe bringing us in another edition of Live from the Heartland. This is your host for this morning, Michael James. I am flying solo because Katie is off at a wedding and Tom is at a funeral. And I'm going to miss those guys, but I'm looking forward to interacting with a whole bunch of wonderful guests and their entourages. So we're going to start off with a little bit of announcements, and then we're going to bring you Daniel Biss, a candidate for governor of the great state of Illinois. A little bit after that, we're going to have Don Rose doing some political analysis. And we're going to end up the show with the filmmaker Will Adams and the singer in one of his films, Stephanie McNair. So stay tuned for the next hour. You're going to have a lot of fun. A couple of things people should know about. Well, we're going to talk about this, but the race for Democratic governor candidate is tightening, with JB losing ground to probably Biss and maybe Kennedy. We'll have more on that in a little bit. Andrea Aurelia, who has been a guest on our show, is off the ballot and back on the ballot. It's kind of a rough situation that's going on for the Attorney General race. No, excuse me, the assessor race. And Lynn wanted me, Lynn Orman, our music producer, was here snapping pictures. She wanted me to mention that there's going to be a tribute to Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters at the Harold Washington Cultural Center on Monday night. That's the 26th. You should like that. And Network 49, active up in the 49th Ward, is working with people for a wonderful event on February 27th at Sullivan High School, school funding panel featuring Ralph Materi of the Center on Budget and Tax Accountability. I think that's enough banter. Let's get right to it.
Was that banter?
That's what it. Well, there was no one to banter with, actually.
It felt pretty lonely to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it was just me reading the announcements. But I got the guy here. I got Daniel Biss, who about a year ago was on our show. Welcome back.
Good to be back, Michael.
It's good to have you. And back then, I couldn't get you to say you were running for governor, but you said it was likely or something was about to happen, and you announced shortly after that. And I'm curious to know is there seems to be an awful lot of enthusiasm about your candidate, which is a good thing for you and probably for most of us. And I'm wondering if there is just put it this way, a kind of a movement quality. You know, I go way back to where the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement brought me along. I wonder what kind of brought you into the picture, being a political guy, and what kind of the spirit and the vibe of your campaign is.
Well, it's been incredibly exciting, and you know, I did announce for governor not long after I was last on this show. That was back in March of last year, and you know, I'll be honest, a lot of people kind of said, okay, fine, whatever, now let's turn our attention back to the Billionaires where it belongs. But over the course of 2017, people came to our campaign. We grew and grew and grew, and then in the last month or two have really been surging in the polls, and we've got this incredible collection of endorsements: MoveOn.org, National Nurses United, Reclaim Chicago, Our Revolution just endorsed us the other day, and there's been a growing movement of people who have basically said, listen, we are not going to be told by the party establishment that in the era of Trump and Rauner the only option is another inexperienced billionaire. Instead, we're going to get behind a middle-class progressive and try to build a different kind of campaign, not just to win, but to transform Illinois. That's pretty exciting. Yeah,
it was. I think we even talked about it back then. Was we have these billionaire candidates for governor at a time when there's a resurgence or an advancement of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party.
Well, let me say two things. Yes, generally speaking, advancement of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which is obviously wonderful, but more specifically, a real backlash against the catastrophic and immoral level of economic inequality in our society. And in that moment, where we are more freaked out than ever about the fact that more and more of the wealth is going to a few people and the rest of us are basically being left behind, why would the Democratic Party line up to say, yes, more of that for us too? It just seems like a real mistake.
Well, what was the reason? It was because J.B. Pritzker had money and was going to finance his own campaign.
Yeah, listen, Michael, J.B. has now spent $56.2 million of his own money.
It's a lot of dough.
It's, I mean, from where I sit, it's a lot of dough, that's for sure. For him, it's probably just a rounding error. But listen, $56.2 million, that's more than Donald Trump spent to get nominated for president. It's a crazy amount of money, and I think everyone knows, including JB himself, that he wouldn't be in this race, he wouldn't be taken seriously as a candidate if he weren't a billionaire. That there's part of the Democratic Party that has said, well, listen, if you can't beat him join them. That's what we're going to do too. And I think you and I know, as most people in Illinois feel in their bones, that if the Democratic Party goes down that path, then it's not going to be a party that's working hard to solve the fundamental problems of economic inequality and economic injustice. That's why this primary matters so much.
Yeah, I keep thinking that Browner, you know, he kind of makes an appeal, tries to be a working guy with his Carhartt and his motorcycle. I'm wondering what JB would kind of, what his pitch is. I mean, you got two guys, if he were the candidate, you'd have these two millionaire, billionaire guys running against each other, trying to act like they were normal people.
Yeah, I mean, I think against Rauner, JB's pitch will be, I'm the nicer billionaire, which is true, by the way. He's a much nicer billionaire
guy, yeah,
than Rauner. And by the way, if he's the Democratic nominee, I'm going to work my butt off to elect him, because he would be a much better governor than Rauner.
Are we all clear on that? Will people play nice? If you're the nominee, you think that JB, Pritzker, and Kennedy will be on board?
I'm sure they'll be on board, though. What I've said is if I don't win the nomination, I'll be working just as hard and doing just as much for the nominee as I would if it was me. I would hope Pritzker would say the same thing, right? So I asked him in a debate a few weeks ago, hey man, I said, you've given $42 million to your own campaign. At that point it's 42, now it's 56.
Way up now.
I said, you've given $42 million to your own campaign to just get nominated, and you say that the important thing is to beat Bruce Rauner. Will you commit to give at least $42 million to whoever is the Democratic nominee in the effort to beat Bruce Rauner? And he found himself not totally able to give a straight answer to that question.
Where are you at with unions? I know that a lot of unions fell in line behind Madigan and Pritzker. You do have the National Nurses. Anyone else? Are there any battles going on with you that are residual effects of your earlier stance on some issues?
I don't think so. So I was really excited to get the endorsement of the National Nurses United, the first national labor union. They're a progressive group. They're a progressive group. They're fighting for universal health care with incredible fierceness and strategic sense. They're the first national union to make an endorsement in this race, and they endorsed me. And Pritzker has gotten a whole bunch of Illinois union endorsements. And listen, the labor movement's under attack, and they're incredibly concerned about beating Rauner, and they feel like they need Pritzker's money to beat Rauner. I fundamentally disagree. I don't think that's the right call, but I don't think that's about them not liking me or trusting me. I think that that's their strategic calculation about what it's going to take to beat Bruce Rauner. I've been the chairman of the Labor Committee the last 2 years, fighting Rauner's agenda, fighting against attacks on workers, fighting against attacks on collective bargaining, and they've seen me in that role enough to understand where my values are and where my priorities land.
We're talking with Daniel Biss, a candidate for governor of the great state of Illinois. You're listening to Live from the Heartland on Saturday morning, the 24th of February. And, you know, I've been watching the Olympics a lot, and I also watch a lot of news. And, of course, the ads are popping up. And there's a bunch of ads that doesn't really say, unless you really get up close and maybe find some fine print, that are attacking you. And they attack you over pension issues, over charter school issues, and over, garnishment of wages. Yeah. So those may have been things that you were on a questionable side on in your youth in the legislature. Where are you at on those issues now?
Well, let me just start by saying it's pretty interesting that J.B. Pritzker is now spending millions of dollars attacking me, right? This is the billionaire playbook, right? They got freaked out. They realized, wait a second, there might be a middle-class progressive governor. If that happens, the billionaires are going to have to pay their share. We're going to do whatever we can to stop it. And so they unload all kinds of misleading attacks. And what's particularly interesting is that on that debate in Carbondale that I mentioned earlier, it was Tuesday night, and in that debate on a Tuesday night, J.B. Pritzker said, I don't think Democrats should ever criticize other Democrats. I think that we should focus all our attention on Bruce Rauner. That was a Tuesday night, and Thursday morning, 36 hours later, the first attack ad aired. So let me tell you, these guys are freaked out about what happens when a movement progressive has a chance to actually beat them. But let me address the substance of the attacks. I'll take them in reverse order.
Good.
You mentioned this question of student loans. I mean, what an extraordinarily bogus attack. I voted for a bill that certainly didn't help any bank, didn't help any private industry. I voted for a bill that was advocated by the Illinois Student Assistance Commission to give them the same rights that federal student lenders have, because lacking those rights, they had been forced to take student loan borrowers to court sue them and screw up their credit rating. So that was a bill that created that parity to avoid that problem. In the meantime, there is nobody, and I mean nobody in the legislature who has a stronger record than me on student loan borrowers, on fighting payday lenders, on fighting wage garnishment, on fighting wage assignment. I have been leading the fight, carrying the spear on these issues throughout my career, not just recently.
So that's fake news that they're putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not literally a lie, but it is such a profound mischaracterization that as far as I'm concerned, it might as well be. So that's that issue. On charters, listen, here's where I'm on charters. I support a moratorium on charters. I think that building new charters while closing neighborhood schools is a mistake. I think neighborhood schools are the foundation of a school system. I think holding charters accountable is important. I have voted to do that. I have voted, let me give you an example, I voted to make sure that charters are held to the same standards as neighborhood schools when it comes to English language learners, when it comes to special education. I've voted to shut down the Illinois Charter School Commission's authority to put charters in local communities against their will. I've signed on to letters opposing charter expansion in your own neighborhood of Rogers Park.
And we have voted to keep them out.
And that's the appropriate role of a local community. And yet somehow, because I support parity, I've been accused of being somehow taking money away from local neighborhood schools. So that's another attack that I think is a little misleading. But again, I just take it as a badge of honor. The fact they're worried seems to mean that we're doing something.
No, and I think that what I told people who happened to be sitting around me when I saw that ad was, you know, in the early days, a lot of people thought charter schools was a good idea. They were run in conjunction with public schools, and they were kind of progressive early on. All of a sudden, it became like a money factory for some people, and they really changed.
Well, and you have to hold them accountable, and you can't allow for-profit charters. You can't allow them to be, you know, hoodwinking kids and families or sucking money out of communities. And that's something that I have always stood for, is real accountability and real parity. What I'm not going to say, though, is that if the charter school is already there, that we should somehow wind up underfunding it and harming the kids who are there. That doesn't make sense either, right? So that's the position that I took, and the position I would still take. Now, the other question you asked about
on the pensions, because when I first met you was when I was still the head of the president of the Democratic Party in the 49th, and I remember you came to talk, and I was right in your face about it. And
you were pretty polite.
I was I say I was in your
face.
But I raised our friend Fred Klonsky, who was, you know, he's just really uncompromising on the pension issue. So where are you at on that, and how have you evolved?
Yeah, I mean, so this is an issue where I have evolved, and let me explain that evolution because I think people have a right to know about it. I got to Springfield in 2011. There was this massive debt, massive pension debt, big problem, and I was trying to struggle with ways to address it. And my preferred solution then was what my preferred solution is now, which is have a progressive income tax, fund the pensions properly. What we got told was that the votes aren't there to do that. That's not going to happen.
This was under Quinn, right?
Correct. Exactly right. And
who was the Democratic governor before Rauner.
Also true. And so the conventional wisdom said, hey, if we're going to get a progressive income tax, the only way to do it is to first either make changes to pension benefits or else make further cuts to human services and education. And I was too quick to accept that false choice and said, all right, I'll take the least bad of the bad options, do the least bad thing available, instead of realizing, hey, the role of an elected leader when faced with the reality that the right thing is not yet possible is to organize people to change what's possible. And that's been the most important learning experience of my time in the legislature, and it has been clear in my voting record throughout my time in the legislature since that episode, including voting against a series of pension changes that were pushed by Democrats in the last few years. Well, there's a lot of pressure on me to vote yes, but I voted no because I saw that it was not the right thing to do. What I find frustrating about these attacks, and you know, J.B. Pritzker's got the right to attack me on my voting record, that's cool, that's fine. But let's ask about his position, because he's taking pot shots at my voting record after I've been in the legislature for 7 years and taken thousands of votes. He's not been there, he's not taken any votes, but he did take one position, which is that in 2011, when these pension debates were raging, he wrote $10,000 checks to the organization that was trying to push for the most radical pension changes, that was trying to do away with pensions altogether, that was attacking me at the time for not going far enough. And J.B. Pritzker doesn't say, wait a second, here's what I've learned since then. He doesn't admit that happened and talk about his evolution. He just wants to sweep it under the rug and pretend it never happened. And to me, that's a difference in leadership style and frankly a difference in character. Because here's something that is bad news but important to share with you. I'm not going to be a perfect governor, and that we've never had one, and we're never going to have one. And when I finish my first month of being governor, I'm going to learn from what didn't go as well as it could have during that month and be a better governor the next month and a better governor the month after that, because I'm honest about my learning experiences. And if JB isn't willing to be honest about his evolutions and his own learning experiences, then I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble if he becomes governor.
So you've been in the legislature for 7 years. The two other candidates, there are more than two, and I saw a couple of them on the Channel 11 public television. I forget all their names. One guy was for dividing the state into 3 parts.
Yes.
Which, well, I found that kind of unique. I had never heard that before. But you've been in the legislature for 7 years. The two main candidates that you were running against, which would be Kennedy and Pritzker, neither of those guys have served in government at all. They're just very wealthy guys who decided that they would like to be the governor.
Well, that's right, but I mean, obviously it's worked really well with Trump and Rauner.
That's true too, but, well, it hasn't worked very well.
Well, that's my point.
That's
right?
your point. I'm a little slow on the take there.
The idea that in the era of Trump and Rauner, Democrats would say, yeah, let's do some of that, just strikes me as an incredible mistake. Let's pick someone with real experience, who knows how to make government work, who understands something about government based upon time spent there, not based upon just some sort of egotistical desire to be at the top of the food chain.
So we've got 24 days left until the primary. That's
sure
March 20th.
Yep.
And people can still register to vote. And if they don't get it done, they can go online and register, but they can also bring 2 means of ID, 2 pieces of ID on election day, and they can vote. What's gonna happen in your campaign, hopefully in the next 24 days? And I wanted you to address Downstate.
Yeah.
What's happening? We're up here in Chicago. We got the blue bubble. Things are good in a lot of ways, and I'm just curious to know how it looks in the rest of the states, in Moline, in in Carbondale, in Cairo. Tell us a little bit about what you see when you go around the state.
Yeah, well, what I see is a lot of people who are hurting, a lot of people who've been left behind, a lot of people whose economic situation is a result of very systemic disinvestment, and a lot of people who see the Democratic Party paying no attention to them and therefore likely to vote Republican, even though maybe they agree with the platform of the Democratic Party more. And so we've spent a lot of time downstate organizing people, building networks, listening to people who aren't used to being listened to by Democratic candidates for governor. And we've had tremendous success. I was endorsed yesterday by the newspapers in both Bloomington and Decatur. Based upon the time that I've spent there and the relationships I've built there, we've got incredible groups of people, and it's this wonderful diverse mix. We've got phenomenal energy on campuses. We just finished a 14-college tour with new volunteers engaged in activism on colleges across the state, but we've also got all new resistance groups of women in their 40s and 50s and retirees who are building together this very, very diverse quilt of activism that frankly the state hasn't seen before, and that I think is going to change life in Illinois, and I think it's going to be a very important part of our victory on March 20th. See,
I remember during the Chewy campaign, it was a movement quality. A lot of people who've been involved and even critical of electoral politics in a number of ways got involved. Do you feel that that kind of thing is happening with you? I refer to it as a movement-esque kind of vibe.
I do. It's incredibly exciting, and again, for reasons way beyond whether I win or lose. It's exciting for the new politics that we're building. I decided to run because after Trump got elected, I started traveling the state and saw the beginnings of this kind of movement politics growing, and I thought we need a governor who's going to nurture that and use that as a governing tool. And now, a year later, this is so awesome. A year later, a lot of the people I first met, they're now running for office. They're running for county board in McLean County and Madison County. They're serving on township boards and school boards. There's this new generation. They're running for party offices like state central committeemen or precinct committeemen. They're taking over our politics in the best possible way for the best possible reasons.
We like that. There was a little bit of an issue when you had originally gotten Carlos Rosa as your running mate, and over some stuff he had talked about around Israel, you withdrew that nomination. Now, I don't want to get into that in too much detail. What I would like you to do is tell us a little bit about your running mate, Latissa Wallace.
Yeah, so Letisa is incredible. She's a great friend. We've been friends for a long time. She joined the State House of Representatives in 2014, and I actually, a week later, visited her in her district office in Rockford to talk about a bill that I was working on at the time. But let me tell you about her. She was born in the south side of Chicago. She grew up in the south suburbs, graduated from Hillcrest High School, went to Western Illinois, then had a son, and raised her son as a single mother while putting herself through a master's program and PhD program at Northern Illinois University in educational psychology, became a counselor and case manager, and eventually became a state representative, and she is a fierce, progressive fighter. She's one of very few single parents in the legislature, and as you can imagine, there's not a better fighter than her for child care. She's a fighter for economic and racial justice, and she understands that economic and racial justice are tied together and are best fought for as one issue, not as two separate issues. And she understands the new economy and the way that most families are being pushed further and further and further down so that a few incredibly wealthy people in the financial industry can take from the rest of us, and she is a fierce fighter to level the playing field.
Daniel Biss, final question. Let me think of a good one. Just tell us why you should be the governor of Illinois.
Well, you asked this beautiful question about movement politics. Let this be the time that in an era of pain and an era of billionaires running government for their own benefit, we as Democrats do the opposite and build a new progressive movement based on what people across our state have for decades known was the right form of government but haven't had the tools to build. Let's have a middle-class progressive as their governor, someone who understands how to actually accomplish something in state government, and let's do it by building a movement that can then hold me accountable when I'm governor and move the entire legislature in the right direction. So visit us at danielbiss.com or our Facebook page, facebook.com/DanielBiss. Join this movement during the course of the last 24 days, because we're not going to outspend the other guys. I'm not going to out-famous the other guys. None of my uncles was ever president. But we are going to be able to be successful because of people talking to people and building a powerful, beautiful, diverse, progressive movement to transform Illinois.
Daniel Biss, you're a hell of a guy.
Hey, thanks for
having me.
And
we're gonna go out from this segment with "Money Can't Buy You Love." So cue it up there, Nolan Chin, and we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland, and we're gonna do a little political analysis with our old friend Don Rose.